Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about a leaking sunroof issue that's common with Pontiac Grand Prix and Chevy Monte Carlos, because I think they share the same sunroof. I actually kind of ripped apart this car trying to chase after or troubleshoot it, because there could be multiple things that could be wrong with it. But I'm going to start off with what was actually wrong with this car and address it, because this is the reason I'm making the video, because there's a bulletin out there for dealerships on this issue, but there's nothing out there for do-it-yourselfers on how to exactly do this, because the bulletin just instructs dealerships to look into a certain section on how to do something in their dealership manuals. And if anybody knows, those dealership manuals are really expensive if you try to buy it yourself, unless you're buying really old ones. But so we'll start off with what was the issue with this. What the issue was is that after heavy rain or long periods of rain, water would accumulate into the driver's floor pan, and what caused that was that the drainage tube at the very end here inside the A-pillar in the frame would be partially clogged by padding or something of that sort, and if it rained long enough or heavy enough, that it would actually overspill somehow into the floor pan. So how you get to that is you would actually remove this plastic fender piece and along the door, and then you're probably going to want to unbolt. Sorry, let's see. You're probably going to unbolt the bottom panel, and then you can peel back your carpet. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is you want to get to this. There's actually an access hole right here. And in order to get to it, because you got to remove your parking brake and your hood latch release, because it's blocking it. And there's 3 bolts that hold it. One on the bottom, which is clear to see, and then there's 2 on the top. And the one towards the engine is actually pretty easy to see and get to, but the third one's actually a little tricky. So you're probably going to want to remove this access panel to, I believe, to the ECM. And actually, if you see, this aluminum bracket actually blocks the third one, but you can actually see the thread through this little hole right here, the thread of the bolt and the nut. And the way I did it, because there's really no way to get that wrench like this, coming underneath, or there's actually no way. The way the bracket's designed, there's nothing you can really get there without cutting your hand or something like that. So with the way I did it, I had the ratchet or box wrench has to be oriented this way, but you just get down underneath, get it up there, and there's enough room to push it up far enough and then pull it back in. And then you should be able to see through this little hole with a light, guide in that socket or box wrench and get it in there, and then you actually have enough room to break the nut. But then I just took, as soon as I broke it, I just took the ratchet out and undid it by hand. So after that, once you get all 3 done, it should be easy just to push the whole bracket assembly aside, and then you're going to see wiring coming from the frame, and you just peel back this padding, and there is a triangular cutout into the frame. And then if you reach in there, there it is, the end of the sunroof drainage hose. Actually, before I even dug, when I first did this, when I got my hand in there, I just felt to see where the tube was and felt it, and sure enough, the tube was actually sitting awkwardly right on top of some foam. And if you don't know, there's actually most manufacturers actually put a sound deafening foam to keep road noise out, and they just fill it in along the frame, and it was sitting up on there. Now you can actually do the same exact thing, but it's actually much easier since you don't have to worry about a bracket in your way. But if the passenger side is doing the same thing, but all you do is peel back that plastic and the rug, and it's right there, and it's actually much easier to worry about. But noticing that I think this tube is actually a little longer than the other one, and that's probably the reason why, because the one on the driver's side actually sits like 2 inches above the foam, and this one was really long and it sits right on top of it. So I'm maybe even thinking about making this rubber tube shorter so it can just dangle there instead of accidentally sitting on top of something again. So that's how you do it. That's what to address the bulletin. Now, some other things that may be wrong with, that may have happened, that may cause the same or something similar, is that you may have a partial clog in the hose, or maybe the hose actually disconnected. I've seen that sometimes. So that's the reason why I undid the roof. Usually the disconnected hose usually up front. There's typically 4 hoses, 2 in the front. Sorry, 4 hoses, 2 in the front, 2 in the rear. Sometimes this hose right here will just be disconnected and dangling. So sometimes it's just that simple, and you have to get the headboard off, or I'm sorry, the headliner off, and just put it back in there. And I would recommend using zip ties to make sure that doesn't happen again. Or you can use this little aluminum C-clamp, so be careful. Don't tighten it down too much, or you'll crush that plastic, and then you have to replace the whole thing probably, or try to repair it with epoxy, and that's sometimes a little pain in the butt. But the rears, I don't typically hear people say that there's an issue with those, but just to show you that, you would rears are obviously in the rear corner of the frame, and then it runs along. Sorry, then it runs along the top of the door, and then if you can see the hose, the big thick rubber hose that holds by a white bracket, and it goes down somewhere down in there. I don't know if you have to get through the trunk or actually pull that plastic panel off to get to it, but I'm not going to worry about it since it's not my issue. And I don't hear too many people complain about it. But so you typically can do that. And then what else is there? Sometimes it just plain out gets clogged, and sometimes it's good just to go ahead and take some weed eater line or something along that nature, mechanics wire, and actually sorry if I can get there, but actually the drainage tube is actually down in here, and you might be able to get to it, but I found it a little easier just to go ahead and do the headliner. I don't know if you got the time to do it, but headliner and just pull the hose out and ram it down in there. Maybe another couple issues might be maybe yours is happening on the passenger side only, and first thing you probably want to check is to make sure it's not like you're losing coolant and your evaporator coil is actually leaking. So you'll make sure that doesn't smell sweet and that's not coolant. So if it's not coolant, it just seems like rainwater. It could be the tube on that side got blocked also, or it could also be that you need to unclog your cabin filter. And typically your cabin filter, not to say I've done it with this one yet, but your cabin filter is hiding in the cowl underneath your wiper blades, so you're probably going to want to move your wiper blades up and undo your hood and get to that and replace it. I haven't seen it happen with GM, but I've heard other manufacturers that's an issue. I'm just tossing it out there just so people know where to look. So hopefully this video is very helpful, and if you got any questions or comments, just feel free and I'll try to respond back to them. Alright, thanks.